Welcome to this session. My name is Barbara Gochalia, and we are going to look at human resource planning. So when we talk about human resource planning, we are basically looking at how organizations work to find that they get the right employees with the rightful skills in the rightful positions to be able to attain organization goals, right? So human resource planning, basically, like I've already shared, that it involves organizations making sure that they move from the current manpower position they are in to the desired manpower position they are in by ensuring that they attain the rightful employees with the rightful skills to be able to fill at the right positions at the right time, right? So what are the objectives of human resource planning? Objectives of human resource planning. One of them is to forecast human resources requirement. So organizations have needs, they have human resource needs. And for them to be able to know, they have to forecast, they have to make sure that they think ahead in terms of the human resource, the employees that they need, right? And of course, we are going to see that this forecasting is done. We have a method. We have ways. They have ways that they do this forecasting to be able to plan ahead, such that they get the right employees to fill the rightful positions. Then also the human resource planning has an objective of attaining efficient management of change, right? So in a number of cases, we've seen that these organizations change in terms of management. And for example, when a new kind of management comes in most cases, they also employ or recruit new workers. So for that, because of that, it is very important that human resource planning is put into consideration. Then also human resource planning is aimed at realizing organization goals. For example, you may find different organizations have different goals. Some of them have a goal of profit maximization, others have a goal of sales maximization, others aim at growth maximization, others aim at shareholders maximization, stakeholders maximization, output maximization, and so on, right? So let's assume that an organization is aiming at growth maximization. And with the growth maximization, it could be that this organization wants to expand and open up other branches elsewhere in other regions, maybe within the country or even out of the country. So in that perspective, if an organization is expecting to expand and maybe open up branches, of course, it has to plan. It has to plan for its human resource, and that's where the human resource planning comes in, right? Such that it recruits, it gets the rightful employees or workers for those branches that it wants to open up, right? Such that it realizes its goal of growth maximization, if that is its goal. Then also human resource planning has an objective of promoting employees. So we are going to realize that with human resource planning, as employees, I believe some of us are employed there. We are working for organizations somewhere. And as an employee, of course, you desire to as an employee, you always desire to go to another level. You desire to be employed, to be promoted. So in regard with promotions, it is very important that the human resource planning is put into consideration such that in case of anything, right, these workers are promoted. Of course, they don't just promote you out of the blue, but it will depend on a number of things, of course, with the training, with the development, yeah, capacity building, and so on. So we are going to realize that at the end of the day, promotions help give rise to the need for human resource planning. And then the human resource planning also has an objective of effective utilization of human resource. So with the effective utilization of human resource here, we basically mean that if there is deficiency, if, for example, there is that you don't have the workers that you have do not have the rightful skills, right? Then it means that they are not going to deliver. They are not going to work towards attaining the organization goals. So at the end of the day, as for example, the human resource plan department in the organization, it will require that you put the human resource planning into consideration to be able to get people with the rightful skills. On a number of occasions, we've seen people having jobs where they do not even have the qualifications, and you ask yourself how they got there, right? So in many scenarios, people are having jobs even where they don't have the required skills, but probably because there is what we call technical know-how. Someone knows somewhere and they are fixed somewhere, but even what they are doing is totally different from what their qualifications are. So in that perspective, human resource planning comes in such that there is effective utilization. You're using the people that are having, the employees or that are having the rightful skills to be able to help the organization achieve its goals, right? So what are the needs for human resource planning? Why is it that, in other words, what is the importance, right? What is the importance of human resource planning? So at macro level, human resource planning is required basically because of because of the unemployment situation. Yeah. So here in Uganda, we have a challenge, right? We have, should I call it a problem? We have a problem of unemployment. Yeah, we have a problem of unemployment, and with unemployment, basically, you find the right people have studied, but they don't have jobs. They cannot find the rightful jobs. So that is a problem actually in our country and many other African countries. So the need for human resource planning comes in basically to solve the problem of unemployment, whereby we basically here it will require organizations searching, right? Searching for people with the rightful skills to fill the rightful positions to be able to enable these organizations achieve their goals, right? So, of course, if the human resource planning is done in a rational way, then we shall have people getting jobs. But in most cases, it's not done rationally. And at the end of the day, the people with the rightful skills are not getting the jobs, but rather people are getting jobs because they know someone somewhere, which is not not fair. Then also technological change. So because of technological change, basically this is like reasons that lead to the need of what? Of human resource planning. So in a number of instances, we've had technological change. And technological change basically comes, follows change in a change in the recruit in the type of employees that organizations are having. For example, we had what we call, it was that is it a shift from analog to digital television, that kind of technology, whereby, for example, we basically we need people that are trained. Are we together? For example, when it comes to people that are working with the media, and it has to do with the transformation from analog to digital, then even the machines they are using in those, for example, TV stations will be different. It will no longer be the analog machines or equipment that they are using, right? But it will be, they will be using different machine, because it is a shift basically from analog to digital. So basically there, if these journalists do not have the required skills, then you find yourself being swept away or being replaced by other people that have the technical skills. So technology, of course, progress or improvement or increase in technology also requires people that are matching, that are compliant with the changing technology. So if you've not updated your papers, or you updated your studies, at the end of the day, you may find yourself being replaced because you do not have the relevant technological skills. So human resource planning in this perspective will come in basically because if technology has changed, then definitely also the people, the workers also have to be in line with that technology. Then organizational change, like we've already seen that changes in these organizations where, for example, you may find that an organization is changing from a different, it could be that it's changing from a different business to another business. It is transforming, yeah? Maybe previously it has been dealing with in goods, production of goods and services, but now it's transforming maybe to a consultancy, to provision of consultancy services. So definitely there, it will require a change in the human resource, which it will require a change in the employees. So you'll find that organization in this perspective will need to plan ahead, to plan for this change, right? Such that they get the rightful workers with the rightful skills to fill these positions, to be able to help them achieve that goal of, for example, transforming into another different type of business. Maybe they are changing from producing goods and services to a service sector, maybe providing consultancy services. That would totally mean that they have to plan ahead and be able to get the rightful employees. Then skill shortage. So for example, we see that some of these employees that, like we've already seen that some of them are in these positions, but they are not competent enough. They don't have all the required skills for these positions. So most of us actually, I don't know about my students here, but most of the students, or most of the people that are studying, some of them actually are just protecting their jobs. They're just securing their jobs, right? For example, when there is pressure and they are like, if you don't have a master's degree, you're not going to survive here. Then you find people all of a sudden enrolling for masters, enrolling for PhDs, not because they really want to study, but they are just securing their jobs in the names of getting papers. Are we together? So if you don't have enough skills for that job, you should plan ahead. Planning ahead to ensure that you're not displaced. So in most cases, the human resource department in an organization may realize that the kind of workers they are having are not having the required skills. There is shortage of skills. So that would definitely require them to plan. Yeah. And that's where the human resource planning comes in, to plan such that they get the rightful workers or employees to fill these positions, competent workers. Then government influences. Government has a lot. Government policies have a lot to do with the determining the human resource planning for organizations. For example, the labor laws. For example, you could find that the government maybe is in favor of. You've seen what they call gender balance. These jobs where they advertise and they are like, we are an equal opportunity organization. We employ maybe the females and the males, that kind of thing. So in most cases, government has influence on these workers, on these organizations, whereby it may put restrictions on them. For example, to employ women to employ a certain number of women, that kind of thing. Working conditions for workers, or the hours that these workers should have at work. All those ones can be regulated by the government. So of course, the human resource planning will be in line with the government, with the country's prevailing government policies. Then legislative controls. With the legislative controls, for example, there are some countries where they do not, where their laws do not believe in hiring and firing. Yeah. So for them, maybe they believe in lifetime employment, right? So all those, the labor laws governing the country will also give a direction for these organizations when they are planning for their human resources. So what are the approaches to human resource planning? What are the approaches to human resource planning? So there are three. There are three options. Yeah. So first of all, with human resource planning, we should be able to treat education as a consumer good, right? We should be able to treat education as a consumer good. We should be able to treat education as an investment. We should be able to treat education as an investment. And then also we should be able to consider skilled manpower as important in the production of goods and services. So with education planning, when we are carrying out human resource planning, or when organizations are carrying out the human resource planning, they should basically treat education as a consumption good, as an investment good, but also they should also respect human capital. They should respect skilled manpower as being important in the production of goods and services. So with education planning, basically, we have three approaches to educational planning. We have three approaches to education planning, and these are the social demand approach, the rate of return approach, and the manpower requirement approach. So with education planning, let us look at the social demand approach. So with the social demand approach, basically here, when we are doing, when organizations are doing the human resource planning, basically when they are looking at the education planning using this approach of the social demand approach, basically it involves looking at what society requires for education. You may find that society, in some societies, they treasure education, right? They treasure education, whereas certain societies, they do not take education as being important, right? So with the human, when you're carrying out, when organizations are carrying out human resource planning, they also have to study the societies they are in. So for example, if these societies do not really treasure education, then it means at the end of the day, you may find ways, other ways of you may find other ways of meeting the human resource needs. For example, it may require you that maybe you need to train your workers, the very workers, the initial workers that you have at your workplace, such that they get the required skills. You train them on how to get more skills that are needed in your organization. That is the social demand approach, which basically looks at what society requires for education, what society treasures for education. So the human resource managers should know what their society's attitude towards education. For example, if the society treasures education, then it means that most of the people will be educated, and therefore it will not be a struggle to attain to get the required workers. So for the projections, when the human resource planners, when the human resource managers are carrying out projections on this approach of social demand for education planning, they have to base on the following factors. Number one is that they have to look at the income levels of educated people. Of course, when people are educated and they have high income levels, it will require them to, it is just definite that they will also educate their children. So this will have a positive relationship. Highly educated people with high incomes, it will have a correlation, a positive correlation, in a way that they will also educate their children. So at the end of the day, we shall have a society that is filled with educated people. And of course, with these educated people in that society, it will not be a struggle for organizations to look for organization, as they are looking for the supply of the labor or the human resource or the skilled workers required. It will not be a struggle for them. They will not find difficulty. Then also we have to look at factors like tastes and preferences of households for education. We've already looked at this, that if households do not treasure education, then we shall end up with a community or a society with most of the people being illiterate and uneducated, which is a negative, which will be a negative impact towards these organizations as they are looking for skilled workers. Then also we have to consider, as we are carrying out the educational planning, in order for us to plan for our human resources, we should consider demographic characteristics such as fertility and mortality. So with the demographic characteristics here, we are looking at with fertility basically, of course, in Africa here, we have high fertility rates. And the high fertility rates are also correct. They also correspond with the low education rates, right? It is the poor that that give birth to very many children, and the education, the enrollment for education is low. So that one will have a negative impact in terms of country, in terms of these societies having high levels. Of course, they'll have low levels of educated citizens, which will affect the human resource needs for organizations. And of course, the vice versa happens, where, of course, this happens in developed countries which have low fertility rates, and they treasure education, right? Then looking at factors like direct costs on education. Of course, someone who treasures, societies that treasure education will have high costs. They will spend a lot on education compared to societies which do not treasure education, which will spend low on education in terms of studying or educating their students. Then factors like, remember, we are looking at education planning, but all under the human resource planning. And we are looking at the social approach, the social demand approach of education planning. So we look at factors like students' grants, availability of students' grants. Of course, if there are opportunities of having these student grants, then it increase the provision of students grants, will increase opportunities for education, and will increase the number of skilled workers, the number of educated people in the country or in the society, which will ease or facilitate the human resource planning in terms of getting the required manpower with the relevant skills that are needed by these organizations. Then we look at factors like existing standard of admission to various levels of education. Of course, this depends. In most cases, we find that governments, for example, have their criteria, different criteria of enrolling or admitting students. You find some of them provide what we call government. It's called government. What is it called? Government sponsorship. Government sponsorships. So depending on depending on the fraction or the percentage of the percentage that the government provides for admission for government sponsorships or government scholarship. Of course, if it's a high percentage, then this will increase the number of educated citizens in the country, which will facilitate or ease the human resource needs, contrary to where governments provide low scholarships, low government scholarships at different education levels. This could be at tertiary institutions or universities. That was the social demand approach, the social demand approach of education planning. Then we also have another approach of education planning, which is the rate of return approach. The rate of return approach. Now, with the rate of return approach here, it believes, of course, the critics of the social demand approach that we have looked at, for them, they say that no, we should look at the rate. We should not only look at we should not only look at the number of people that are educated in society to be to have a positive relationship with meeting the human resource needs, but we should also look at the rate of return. After these students have finished to study, how are they going to contribute to the future benefits? How are they going to contribute in terms of to contribute towards the, for example, revenue to the government? It is one thing to have a high number of educated citizens in the country, but the question is, how are they contributing to, for example, government revenue? How are they? You may find they are educated, but they are unemployed, right? So with the rate of return approach, for them, they say that it is good for people to be educated, for high proportions of citizens to be educated, but the question is, how are they contributing? What is their rate of the rate of return, right? How are they contributing to productivity to the nation, right? Productivity in terms of goods and services produced, right? So of course, at the end of the day, with the rate of return approach, we are basically looking at how these educated citizens are contributing positively to the government or to the country. And we have different parameters of measuring the rate of return, of this educational planning. We can look at the rate of return in terms of costs of education, the rate of return in terms of how much these people, the rate of return in terms of how much the government is spending on education. Of course, when government, you may find that the government is spending, you may find that the government is spending maybe highly on the education sector, when it knows that at the end of the day, these people are going to be, they're going to benefit in terms of contributing towards contributing taxes towards the government revenue, right? So that will be the rate of return. That's how we shall be one way of measuring the rate of return. Then also we can measure this rate of return in terms of the return on education, like we've already seen that after these people are educated, how do they contribute to the government, for example, in terms of productivity, in terms of production of goods and services in the nation, in terms of maybe becoming entrepreneurs and providing jobs for other people, in terms of paying taxes to the government and thereby contributing to the national income. Then also we measure the rate of return in terms of discounted rate. These discounted rates are calculated where we are discounting the future returns to arrive at the present value. At the end of the day, we shall be able to know that if government has invested on education, highly in the education sector, we can calculate those discounted rates and find out whether it is a profitable venture for the government to invest in the education sector or not. So what are the limitations of the rate of return approach? What are the limitations? Remember, we are looking at education planning, but under the human resource planning. So limitations, these are these are the approaches of education planning. So the limitations of the rate of return approach, one of them is that it is there are limitations associated, right, with availability of data. There are limitations associated. In other words, it's difficult to get the required data to estimate these parameters. Yeah, so that is a limitation of this rate of return approach of education planning, right? And then another limitation is that these calculations of the rate of return analysis are only applicable on relative policies. In other words, they are only applicable if government is in favor of the education policies, right? And then also this rate of return approach, it does not provide for other projects. For example, when we are carrying out the calculations on these discounted rates, we look at different projects. For example, we can look at different sectors of the economy. We can look at the health sector. We compare different sectors: the health sector, the manufacturing sector, the agriculture sector, and the education sector. But here, and this rate of return, of course, now it is looking at education as the only sector, and leaving out the other sectors of the economy, right? So at the end of the day, even when these sectors are, even when these discounted rates are carried out or are calculated, it becomes a challenge to know. You may find out that maybe it is more profitable or financially viable to invest in the education sector, because you know that if the rate of return is high, at the end of the day, the government will benefit. But the question would be how much. The question would be on how much to invest, determining on how much to invest in the education sector. For example, how much should the government invest for it to be able to come out with positive outcomes in terms of the rate of return. Then also, this rate of return approach of education planning does not provide for the supply and demand of skills, because it's one thing to educate the citizens, to invest, for the government to invest in education, and the citizens are educated, but it's also another to look for market, to look for these for jobs, to connect, to link these graduates to the relevant jobs, right? So that is a challenge, especially here in Africa, where people get educated, the government invests a lot in education, but the challenge is linking these educated citizens to the rightful jobs. After they have educated you, after they have given you the scholarships, no one will want to know what happens next. It is you now to begin moving left, right, and center on every street around the town to make sure that you get a job, or to make sure that you find ways of maybe starting up a small business and earn a living. So with this rate of return approach of education planning, it is one thing to calculate figures and know that when the government invests in the education sector, then the number of educated citizens will increase, and then that they will contribute, they will be productive to the economy. But at the end of the day, have these governments connected these people in terms of connecting these people to the employers, connecting the job seekers to the employers? There is a challenge there. There is a very big challenge. So the rate of return approach has been criticized on those grounds. Are we together? The rate of return approach has been criticized on those grounds, and yet with economists, for them, they are just looking at education as the only factor. This rate of return approach only looks at formal education, the formal kind of education. The formal education is this kind of education we are now. Yeah, for example, we are in class here. This is formal education. but it does not consider informal education, because even with informal education, people can acquire skills. And sometimes even you find that these people that have never stepped in class, they go in these they are called mechanics. They learn how to do the mechanics, how to repair these cars. And at the end of the day, they are even better than these educated engineers of ours who have degrees in engineering. Is it mechanical engineering? But when a car gets a technical fault, you find these engineers, these so-called mechanical engineers with degrees all over the place, going to these garages. They are called garages, where they repair those cars. And then you're like, if you are a mechanical engineer with a degree from a recognized reputable university, why is it that when your car gets a technical fault, you are again driving it to that garage where there are those the people you call unskilled, uneducated, illiterate? They are again the ones that are repairing your car. So this rate of return approach only considers formal education, and yet it is important for us to know that even with informal education, people can get skills, which skills actually are required in the number of organizations. Then we have the manpower approach. So with the manpower approach of educational planning, remember that there is a link. With manpower approach, for it says that there is a link. There is a definite link between education and the economic growth. There is a definite link between education and economic growth. And this approach of education planning believes that when people are educated, at the end of the day, they will end up being productive. They will become entrepreneurs. They will start up their own jobs, employ other people, pay taxes to the government, which taxes will increase the national income, which we call the gross national product. So that is the manpower approach, right? And with this manpower approach, basically, it specifies, or it targets industrial production. It targets industrial production. So basically here, these approaches are helping us to carry out for education planning. And we know that education planning has education has a link with the provision of the required skills that are needed by the human resource departments in organizations. I hope we are getting the logic and the link between the two, the education planning and the need for the human resource, the need for human resource, the human capital in these organizations, actually facilitating the human resource planning that we are looking at as a topic. So let's look at the limitations of the manpower requirement approach, which we have said, which we have seen that for this approach believes that there is a link between education and economic development. That when you invest in education, when the government invests in educating citizens, these citizens will become productive and contribute towards the national income or towards the government revenue. So the first limitation of the manpower approach is that it assumes that there are no substitution possibilities. Now, what we mean here by no substitution possibilities, we mean that this manpower approach to education planning, it assumes that there are no substitute. Here we mean that for it looks at the human beings. It looks at human power, right? It looks at labor, of course, as human beings providing the labor, but it will not give provision that these human beings can be substituted by machines. Are we together? Because if the human beings are substituted with the machines, what is going to happen? Machines. Of course, the machines come in with the increase in what? Increase or improvement in technology. So it is one thing to say that when you educate citizens, these citizens at the end of the day, they will be productive, they will contribute to government revenue in form of taxes. But how about when you don't educate the citizens, but you invest a lot in using these machines? Of course, the machines are efficient, more efficient than even the human beings. They simplify work, they quicken work, and they even produce more output compared to someone employing manpower, someone employing human beings to provide the labor. So this manpower requirement approach of education planning has been criticized on those grounds. It assumes that human beings who are providing the labor cannot be substituted by machines. Then the second limitation of the manpower requirement approach of education planning is that for it assumes that there is a link. It postulates that there is a definite link between industrial task and educational level, industrial task and education level. And yet it is not definite that when the government invests, when governments invest in education, that all these educated citizens will end up working in industries, because we've seen that this approach assumes that that the increase in education will lead to increase in productivity. But not everyone who is educated will end up finding themselves working in industries. That is not that is not the case in most cases. Are we together? And then also this manpower approach does not put into consideration, it does not really match the demand with the supplies of education manpower. Like we've already seen that it's one thing to educate citizens, it's one thing for the government to educate citizens, but it's also another to link these citizens, to link the human capital, or to link these educated citizens to the employers, to the potential employers. Yeah, because most of these governments, after they have provided scholarships, educated the citizens, like we've seen, they are just left there to move on streets until their souls are worn off their shoes, which is not good. Are we together? So if you educate and you don't link the educated people to the employers, it is as good as doing a job and you do not finish it, right? So those are the limitations of the manpower approach to education planning. I hope we get the logic here. If there is any question, please feel free to ask. Feel free to ask, such that we do not, I do not assume that we are on the same page. I may be assuming that we are on the same page, but yet we are not on the same page when I've left you very many miles away. So feel free to interact with me. If in case there is anything that you're not, that is not clear, please feel free to raise up your hand, and then we shall be able to get ourselves to, on the same page. So let's look at the human resource planning process. This human resource planning process, what is involved? What is involved in the human resource planning process? So this human resource planning is basically aimed at matching the skills, knowledge, and behavior, right? Matching the people with the rightful skills, with the rightful behavior, with the rightful knowledge to match the rightful positions in these organizations. So it is very important for organizations as they are carrying out the human resource planning to be able to understand the internal and the external environment, that will affect the current and the future workforce. And it's also important for these organizations as they're carrying out the human resource planning to be able to link the human resource strategies with the business outcomes. In other words, if they are finding the appropriate people, the appropriate employees with the rightful skills, at the end of the day, these appropriate workers that are filling these rightful positions should be able to work towards achieving organization goals, like we've already seen that one of the needs for human resource planning is that these organizations achieve their goals. And then also, while doing human resource planning, organizations should be also able to find should be able to make sure that at the end of the day, the human resource planning meets the financial and the human capital requirements, the financial and the human capital requirement. Of course, you do the planning in line with your budget, in line with the amount of money you have in an organization. Are we together? So the ideal human resource planning systems should be holistic. By holistic, we mean that they should consider a number. They should be linked. The strategies should be linked with the budget process. As you're planning to get the rightful employees with the rightful skills to fill the rightful positions, you should also put your budget. You should consider the kind of budget that you have. Of course, you cannot plan it beyond the amount of money that you have as a business or as an organization. As you are planning, you plan in line with your budget. As these organizations are carrying out the human resource planning, they should also consider their budget or their pockets. They should consider their budgets. And then also they should also the human resource planning system should also put into consideration the service needs and the skills needs, that at the end of the day the quality service will be achieved. Yeah, so the human resource planning should be aimed at achieving quality service at the end of the day. Then the human resource planning systems also should be flexible. They should be flexible to the changing variables, like changing economic situation, the changing technological factors, the changing political environment. Of course, we've seen that these factors, we've seen the macro factors that affect human resource planning, right? For example, the economic factors, we see that the changing economic factors, like changing interest rates, changing the inflation rates, of course, will affect the human resource planning, the human resource planning activities of organizations, whereby you see that if, for example, we've been in the COVID-19, we are still in the COVID-19 era. But of course, like after the first lockdown, the second lockdown, the economies were affected, economies were ravaged, countries were suffering economically. And because of that, that was the economic situation, being the negative consequences of COVID-19, whereby economies were being constrained. So because economies were constrained, this had an impact. This had an implication on organizations, on businesses, where we saw that a number of businesses were actually laying off their workers, right? They were actually laying off their workers to be able to meet costs, to be able to survive financially, because most of them could not continue. Actually, others could not see their next anniversary. They could not celebrate their next anniversary because the economic situation was worsening day by day. So we've seen that a number of organizations from that time on, they've been laying off their workers, cutting off their workers. Others were literally, other workers were literally retrenched. So that was an economic situation. So economic situations have a lot to do with the economic factors, have a lot to do with the determining the human resource planning for businesses or organizations. Then we've also seen the technological factors, yeah, where we're seeing the need for a human resource planning. Of course, we saw that with the changes in technology come along with the, of course, matching with the relevant workers that have the relevant skills, matching the technology, the changing technology. We've also seen that political factors also have a lot to influence. They do a lot in influencing the human resource planning. We've also looked at the environmental mandate, for example, where we see that the government's environmental laws, where the governments, for example, may require may require organizations to use more of human beings than machines, because most of these machines, or most of these factories, they use machines, and at the end of the day, they are emitting what we call greenhouse gas emissions. They are polluting, they are contributing to air pollution, whereby this air pollution in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is harmful to people's health. So environmental laws also have a lot to do with determining the human resource planning activities of organizations. So we are saying that a human resource planning system should put all these into consideration. Then it should also be a human resource planning system should also be supportive, right? Supportive in terms of continual learning and development concepts. Continual learning by making sure that these workers, the initial workers can be trained to gain more skills that are needed for these positions. Instead of just bringing in new people with the relevant skills, you can just do the capacity building by training the workers that you already have as an organization. Then these human resource planning systems should also be data-driven. Data-driven should be able to use the available data to forecast. We are going to see later on that during the human resource planning process, we have a stage which is called, or a phase which is called forecasting. So, which is called the forecasting. And of course, we forecast using data. One of the ways we do the forecasting is using the available data with the organization that the organization has. So let's look at the phases of the human resource planning. So this process, basically, the human resource planning process basically has 5 stages. The first one being what you call analyzing, the second one being forecasting, the third one being planning, the fourth one being implementing, and lastly, evaluating. So let us look at the analyzing. I'm going to be brief, but again, precise to the point. So with the analyzing, basically, what we mean, this is the human resource planning process. Analyzing is, I'm going to explain it in terms of examples, is for you, for example, for the organization to be able to look at the current situation, what is happening on ground. For example, is there a need? Does the organization require new employees? Does it require new employees to come in, right? Analyzing the current situation that is in place. And this analysis, basically, we are going to do what we call, organizations have to do what we call a demand and supply analysis. A demand and supply analysis. And of course, this analysis is going to be done by using organization information. For example, organization information. For example, this organization, when it's analyzing, when it's making a demand analysis, a number of factors will have to be looked at. A demand analysis here, we are looking at a demand analysis for workers, a demand analysis for human capital. Does it require more workers to be recruited, for example? So the organization, when it's in the analyzing stage of human resource planning, it will look at the priorities. It will look at its business priorities. It will look at the reports, the organization's internal reports, and also the external reports as well, right? It will look at its budget. Of course, we've seen that you cannot do the human resource planning when you're not putting your budget into consideration, right? Do you have is it favorable for you in terms of your finances to recruit more people? If it is costly for you, then wait, find other measures. Are we together? And then also with the demand analysis, you look at the plans of new technology. For example, if the organization is planning to bring in new machines, and those new machines require specialized people, they require people with the relevant expertise to operate these machines, then it means that there is need for human resource planning. There is need to plan ahead, just in case this machine come into the organization, that there will be the required people with the appropriate skills to operate these machines. So you look at these factors, and these factors will guide these organizations to effectively carry out the human resource planning. Then also of course, it will be the human resource managers that will be the human resource department that will be doing all this. So it can also get the information on demand analysis by using what you call employee survey information, where you get information from these employees, right? Employee survey. For example, if an employee, you're carrying, if these employees, for example, for example, you may ask them, right? Survey, you can use questionnaires. You may ask them if they are willing to be trained, right? For example, if they are willing to be trained to acquire the relevant skills that maybe you need for the new equipment or machinery that will be coming in later in the future, then you do not need to recruit people outside the organization. You just need to train these ones, and then at the end of the day, they will meet the required skills to maybe operate these machines. So all that is in the demand analysis. Yeah, we are still at the first step of human resource human resource planning process, which is analyzing. Then look at the external contract services, right? The external contract services here, we mean that, for example, here we mean that, for example, if there are other organizations that need maybe that if there are other maybe should I call them contracts, that you have as an organization. You can be an organization, but you're having other maybe consultancies coming in. You're working on other consultancies that are different from what you're doing as a business. So if you're getting maybe those subcontracts, that other side business to do as an organization, you may need to recruit extra staff that have those relevant skills to do those other side, what I would call side business or side consultancies, or those other consultancies that may be different from the actual work that you're doing as an organization. Then look at the changing the organization culture. You may find that with the organization culture, that maybe that particular organization may not that particular organization may not really believe so much in bringing people outside the employing people outside the organization, but rather they believe in maybe someone within an organization being trained, and then they are promoted to that other job that requires a specialized kind of skill. Yeah, maybe they would provide, they would do the capacity building, they provide their employees with scholarships to go and study and come back and work for them when they have the relevant skills. Then still under demand analysis, look at the changing competencies. Of course, with the changing competencies require, of course, employees with specialized skills. So that will require, of course, it will require organizations to do the human resource planning, where they are planning ahead of the changing competencies to bring in employees with the relevant expertise. Then also you have to do what we call an environmental scan. This is the analyzing step of the human resource planning, which is step 1, human resource planning process. So still under analysis, you can do what you call an environmental scanning. Then you analyze the environmental factors that affect the demand for labor. Here we are looking at the demand for labor because this is human resource planning process. So the environmental factors, which we have already looked at briefly, there will be the political expectations, political factors, which we've looked at, the demographic changes. These ones are in form of demographic changes. Of course, they are in form of, for example, the age, the sex, whereby we see that with the age, you as an organization, you may find that the kind of people that you're employing, they are about to retire. They are in a retiring age. Maybe most of them are they are approaching towards their 60s. And maybe it may be that according to the labor law, maybe when someone reaches 60, they are supposed to retire. So when you look at as an organization, as your human resource planning, the human resource department looks at these employees, you find most of them are aging, then it will definitely be a signal. It will be a green signal. It will be a signal that you know what, these employees of yours are soon retiring. So you better begin planning for getting other workers that will be able to succeed them. We shall see later on that there is what we call succession planning. You should be planning ahead. If they retire, who will succeed them? Who will fill their positions? So that it has to do with the demographic changes. And then influence of technology on work. We've already seen that technology has a lot to do with determining the human resource planning process, whereby, of course, with the increasing technology will definitely require people with the matching with skills matching the appropriate technology, the appropriate change in technology. Maybe if there are new machines coming in, you require people that have that particular appropriate expertise to operate those machines. So that will definitely require the human resource planning process to come in. Then changes in economic forecasting, we've already looked at that. Yeah, changes in economic forecasting. For example, when you forecast, yeah, of course, I've given an example of the COVID-19 pandemic situation where people were forecasting that, you know what, especially after the first lockdown, businesses were forecasting that the economic future may not be the best. So they were laying off workers to make sure that they celebrate their next anniversary as businesses. So economic factors also, when you're looking at the analysis, you're looking at the demand analysis, demand for labor in this perspective, consider the economic forecasting. Then also the organizations should also analyze the current and future level of accountability. Of course, with what we mean by current and future level of accountability here, at the end of the day, when the costs, for example, on the cost on employees recruitment, recruitment costs, of course, as you recruit in more, it will have implications on you. It will have cost implications. So you have to recruit in line with your budget, meaning knowing that at the end of the day, you will be accountable, right? It will have cost implications. So you have to do it in line with your budget, not just recruit because you want to recruit, but consider your budget in place. So that was the supply analysis, and that was the demand analysis. But also, when you're analyzing, also, of course, the demand analysis is on the side of how much do you require labor? Does the organization need to bring in to recruit, for example, to recruiting workers? Are we together? And then the supply analysis, you're basically looking at much as the organization may require to recruit and bring in new employees with the relevant expertise. Where are these employees going to come from? What are the sources of these? What is the labor market like, right? Will you be able to get these employees, right, with these relevant skills? What is the labor market like? The supply for labor. So here, when we talk about the supply analysis, we are basically talking about the supply for labor. So with the supply analysis, you will still scan and look at the internal factors and the external factors. With the internal factors, you'll be looking at, for example, the age and the gender distribution, right? The age and the gender distribution. Of course, here you'll be able to look at the kind of workers that you need. On many occasions, you have seen that when people, for example, when organizations are making these job adverts, they put a range, they put an age limit. For example, they can say the person should be aged between maybe 25 and maybe 35. They put a range of age, right? Such that they get the kind of people, the kind of age group that they want. So you should be able, as an organization, those are the internal factors that it should look at. It should look at the retirement rates. Of course, with the retirement rates, as you're making that job advert, you put the age limits, just to ensure that you get the people that are in the rightful age, that will not retire the next year. Then location of the workplace. With the location of the workplace, of course, as you're looking for, as you're planning to maybe recruit and bring in new staff, new people with the required expertise, then you should also look at the location of the place, right? Look at the location of the place. You should be able to stipulate that, that the organization is located in such and such a place, and the person willing to fill this position should be able to meet these conditions, the working environment. Are we together? So knowing, of course, that the location, as people are searching for jobs, they also consider the location. If the place is in a remote area or in a village, then it may be a little hard for you as an organization to recruit these people. So you have to find ways of making sure that maybe you make this job more attractive. Maybe you can make it more attractive in terms of the working condition, in terms of maybe the remuneration or the payment, the salary plans, the salary expectations for these prospective employees. Then still under supply analysis, you can look at the length of service, right? The length of service in terms of maybe this job, is it going to be contractual or it's going to be a permanent job, right? So of course that has a lot to do with the kind of people that you're going to get. Some people want contractual jobs, and others they prefer permanent jobs. So you have to put that into consideration as, for example, you're doing the recruitment, or you're planning for this. You're doing out the human resource planning process. Then resignation rates. With the supply analysis, of course, here now you're looking at the resignation rates. For example, it may be that the people within the organization are currently they are over resigning. They are over resigning, and you're asking yourself, you should ask yourself as an organization, as a human resource personnel there, why are people resigning? What is the reason behind these people resigning? So at the end of the day, you should be able to identify that problem and fix it, such that at the end of the day, you do not recruit people and then the next week they are resigning. Then also you should consider, as you're carrying out, the organization is carrying out its a supply analysis during this human resource planning process, it should consider what you call the internal career path. Now, with the internal career path, basically, we've talked briefly about it, that the organization should look at developing these employees. Yeah, develop these employees and make sure that you do cross training. For example, if someone is in the career of IT, make sure that you give them different tasks. We looked at that in our previous class. You watch that recording. Give them different tasks in that same field of technology, such that you give them a broader range of skills to acquire in that career, such that you broaden their career. Train them, what you call capacity building. Train them to acquire more skills in that career, such that you grow their career, and at the end of the day, you will not really suffer a lot, because you have planned ahead of time. You are enriching them with the required skills, such that in future, when maybe something comes in, you've changed the technology, you need people with those relevant skills, you will not again spend on recruiting, on payment of special expertise, special people with special expertise, but you would rather be using the same staff to do that same job at even a lower cost. That was supply analysis. And then also you can look at the external factors under the supply analysis. Look at the labor trends in your country, for example. How are the labor trends? For example, you may find that there are more people looking for jobs than the jobs available, the unemployment rates. So at the end of the day, of course, we've seen that with the unemployment rates, with the high unemployment rates, of course, we know that at the end of the day, that the human resource planning here, people will be a little, organizations will be a little relaxed, because they know that very many people are looking for jobs, and even if someone left, others will be, by the way, because of the high level of unemployment, it's my simple advice to us, those of us that are employed, that let us treasure our jobs. Are we together? The kind of job, when some people are at their workplaces, they don't treasure their jobs, right? They don't treasure their jobs. They're always complaining. They are paying me less money. I'm working. I'm doing a lot of work, A, B, C, D, up to Z. And they will never see the good part of their jobs. But that job that you are minimizing or despising, there is someone else who would like to fill that position, and that person is even better than you in terms of qualifications. That person is even more qualified, more experienced than you are. Are we together? And they're even more willing to do extra work than what you're complaining, that you have a lot of work. They're even, for them, they are more willing to even double the kind of work that you are doing. So let us treasure our job. So the labor trends, if the labor trends are in such a way that there are more unemployed people than the jobs around, the jobs available, then it means that these employers will not, the demand for labor will even be low, because they know that even if the turnover rate is high, that people are resigning every day, you resign, another person comes in. Before you even go out of the gate, before you even exit that gate, by the time you resign, someone else would have entered and sat into your chair in that office of yours and filled your position. So that's what it means for the labor trends to be in such a way that there are more people looking for jobs. There are more people that are unemployed looking for jobs than the jobs that are available. Yeah, so literally meaning that the supply of labor will be greater than the demand for labor. That is not a good situation. So still under the supply analysis, we look at the internal versus the external acceptance rates. So of course, at the end of the day, with these rates, we are looking at, for example, the payment rates. Are we together? The payment rates that you're considering for your employees. Then that was analyzing. Then the second phase of the human resource planning process is what we call forecasting. And the forecasting is basically here we shall be forecasting the demand versus the supply analysis. We are forecasting. Remember, the analyzing, we are basically looking at the factors. We are collecting information on the demand, and we are also collecting information on the supply of labor, right? And we are considering the factors that are affecting the supply of labor, the underlying factors that are affecting the demand for labor, the underlying factors that are affecting the supply of labor. Then phase 2, we are doing forecasting. Then phase 2, we shall be doing forecasting. And here with forecasting, basically, we are looking at actually looking at forecasting is to predict. Forecasting is to predict. Yeah. So we are predicting our demand for labor as an organization, right? And we are also predicting our supply for labor as an organization, right? So there are 4 steps basically in the 4 steps basically that are followed in the forecasting phase. So in the forecasting phase, the first step we carry out is to identify key workforce assumptions. So basically, with the identifying key workforce assumptions, we shall be using the analyzing the information that we have attained from the analyzing, the first phase of the human resource planning process, which was analyzing. So we use that information we have got to know what is happening on ground. For example, if the organization gets to know that the resignation rates are high, people are resigning every week, then the forecasting is that that soon or later the organization will reach a point whereby you do not have employees. So you better, that one calls for the human resource planning, such that you plan for people that are going to come and replace those people that have resigned. So that is identifying key workforce assumptions using the information you've attained from the analyzing stage. Then you validate the assumptions, right? You validate the assumptions. For example, if you assume that it could be that, for example, you have expanded the production of goods and services of an organization has increased. So literally that one means that it may imply that increase in the production of goods and services requires employing more laborers. Yeah. So there, of course, you validate the assumption. Validating is you've now found out that that is true, right? So at the end of the day, then number 3 is you utilize the assumptions for the scenario. So after, of course, you've validated that this is true, that there is increase in the production of goods and services, then you need to recruit more workers to help in the production process. And then at the end of the day, you'll be able to build, to carry out a gap analysis whereby you've already identified that there is a need. And then the next thing will be able to solve that problem by recruiting the rightful workers. So that is forecasting. So with forecasting, we can still use what we call the SWOT or the PESO analysis, the SWOT or the PESO analysis to help us work through this, to help us do the forecasting. So the SWOT analysis the SWOT analysis is an acronym that stands for strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. Strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. And the PESO analysis is an acronym that stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. So we've already looked at that when you're doing the scanning, you will look at all those factors. Those factors will be very important for you to predict, the, for example, the demand, to predict the demand for labor, to predict the supply for labor, and you'll be able to come up with those predictions. So let's go to the techniques of forecasting in this second step of human resource planning, which is called, remember our first stage of human resource planning process was analyzing, and we are looking at now our second stage, which is our second phase, which is forecasting. So let's look at the techniques of forecasting. There are different techniques of forecasting, and one of them is what we call the trend analysis. The trend analysis. So with the trend analysis, basically here we are using historical data. We use historical data to predict the future. And with the trend analysis, it believes that history repeats itself. It believes that history repeats itself. For example, if for example, using the available data the organization has, you realize that it has been discovered that every year we have an increment. Every year there is an increase in employment by 5%. Yeah, so you're looking at a trend and you discover that every year your organization has been having an increment in laborers by 5%. So definitely you will use that trend. The trend analysis believes that history repeats itself. So we shall use that trend. As the human resource manager or department, you'll be able to use that trend and of course predict that every year that comes in, you'll have to increase the laborers by 5%. So that is a trend, what we call trend analysis, which is an approach of forecasting. Then the second approach is what we call the ratio analysis. The ratio analysis. And in the ratio analysis, basically, here we consider a relationship between two variables. We consider a relationship between two variables. Yeah. So for example, we can, in a ratio analysis approach of forecasting, we can consider the relationship between productivity or the sales, the organization sales in relation to the employees. For example, if we project, for example, if it so happens that for every 5 employees, yeah, that if it so happens that for a particular organization, it takes 5 employees to produce 100,000 units of goods and services, 100,000 units of a particular product, then that is a ratio. Taking a ratio of that, it means that when the productivity increases to, for example, 1 million, then it means that that for us, that it will require the organization to increase the number of employees to 50 employees. Are we together? Because the ratio means that the ratio is 5 to, the ratio is five workers, they will produce, if you use 5 workers as an organization, they'll produce 100,000 units of that product. So it means that when production increases to 1 million units of that product, then it means you have to employ 50 employees. Are we together? Because 50 employees, you require 50 employees to produce 1 million units of that product. So that is a ratio analysis approach of forecasting, because you are looking at a relationship between 2 variables, and in this perspective, you are looking at a relationship between the employees and the total sales or the total productivity of an organization. So you very well know that if productivity increases this much, because you've studied the ratios, then also you have to increase the employees by this much. Are we getting that? All right. So I want us to stop here unless there is any question. Is there any question? Because we've been silent all along, and
Yes. Yes, I have a
Charles.
question or an observation.
Yes.
I'm looking at the trends in the current trends of what has been happening.
You're
Can
not
you hear
clear.
Me? You hear me now?
Yes.
I was saying that, how would you explain that while most organizations do the initial planning for jobs and everything, how do you explain the trend that other organizations are taking these days, that they don't necessarily give the job to the actual person with that qualification, but they've moved away from qualifications to skills, in terms of, can you transfer the skills you have from whatever you studied to do this job?
I've not got, but what I'm trying to pick is that can there be that can organizations employ people according to skills?
No, that certain organizations, for example, like big organizations like Google, and I also know an organization in Uganda here, whereby they no longer employ you based on your degree. They will just say the job is this, apply for it, and then they say these are the tasks you're supposed to do. Doesn't matter what paper you have, or even if you don't have it. Can you do that job? And then they give you the job, as long as you meet the competencies that they need during the interview.
Will the job be hands-on?
It can be technical, it can even be anything. It can be technical and can be, as long as you can prove that you can do it.
Yeah, of course. When they've not even looked at your papers, nothing.
No, they don't. They say everyone has papers. People can have papers, but they don't know what. They want people who actually do the work. So they give you a practical skill in whatever the job is supposed to be.
Have you just had that somewhere, or it has happened to you? I want if it has happened to you, because it's one thing to say that this organization does this, like, because you've had it from someone.
No, it has happened to me.
It has happened to who?
To me.
To you?
Yeah.
That you were employed because of skills?
Yes, because
no one never was interested in looking at your papers?
Not at all. They just know you have a degree and that's it. No one bothers to look at which degree is it, what class was it. No one cared. They just
do they even look at that degree? Do they even look at those papers?
Nope, they don't.
Are you sure they did not ask you for the CV? And
they just asked for a CV only.
They only asked
for a CV, yes, but no papers.
And that's where you're working?
Yeah.
Here in Uganda?
Yes.
Then that's amazing. That's amazing because at the end of the day, of course, we've been looking at all these approaches. We've been looking at all these approaches where we saw that we looked at the human, the manpower approach, which says that there is a relationship between education and productivity, right?
Exactly.
And then we saw the rate of return approach, which says that, which says that no, it's not about the education, but it's about the kind of people that you've educated. Are they productive? Do they have the skills? Are they contributing to the, for example, to the GDP, the gross national product? Are they contributing to the national income? Are they becoming entrepreneurs to employ other people within the country and create jobs? Yeah, that was the rate of return. So practically all these, this is the theoretical bit of it, but at the end of the day, the question is, by the way, even employers are changing. Most employers are changing the way of doing things. And the human resource trends are changing day by day. Gone are the days where people used to move with like so many papers. Yeah. And then you go for interview. Most of these interviews, by the way, they will not even want to look. The papers will be there, but just for, because of course the paper is the beginning, I should say the beginning, the basics.
Filter.
Yeah, the papers will be the basics just for you to enter, and then the rest of the things will be practical. It will be hands-on basically. They will give you a laptop. They will tell you to do this. For example, they will tell you write a policy brief, right? Write a policy brief, and if you don't know what a policy brief is, that you'll be off. The next time it will be oral. They will ask you, for example, policy. You don't know policy, and that's off. You get. So jobs are becoming now, employers are now getting it right. That the papers are good, but there should be, you should have what you call a competitive advantage. Competitive advantage. What is competitive advantage?
I think it's where you're looking at what you have to offer beyond what everyone else has.